Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Well, it's here. The long-awaited Next Unearthed Arcana for 1D&D, the Cleric and Revised Species. Now, when I read this title, the first thing that struck me, and it wouldn't be surprised if it struck you as well, is what the heck do they mean by species? Well, it appears they're referring to the races that appear in this document as species. So, there you go. We're switching the term race with the term species. Obviously, there's the whole politically correct terminology thing, but species honestly just makes more sense than race. So in this video, I am going to go over all the changes we see in this playtest document from our previous playtests as well as from the base rules. Just give you a complete breakdown of everything that changed. They've got a video up right now where Jeremy Crawford kind of goes through the changes to Cleric and the changes to the species, but he doesn't go into everything. I will be going into everything. There's a lot more that changed here than you might think. A lot of it clarification, and a lot of it questions I have been asking forever have now been answered. So those are all just great to see. And speaking of questions I've had, another question I asked was answered here. If we go to page 2, we'll see under subclasses it says, in some cases, you might find an older subclass that doesn't fully work with the features in the playtest version of a class. If we publish the new version of the class, we'll resolve that discrepancy. Because in our last playtest, there were some issues with compatibility. And I noticed that if this is supposed to be backwards compatible, then why aren't the old subclasses working properly with the new classes? So they have addressed that. They're saying, yeah, some of them might not work quite the same or quite right. Don't worry about it. Once we officially publish these classes, that'll all be dealt with. So I'll take them at their word. But what I want to do is start with the rules glossary, because there are some really significant changes and clarifications in the rules glossary. There's enough stuff in the first part of this document that refers to the rules glossary. It's better to just know what rules you're dealing with before we get into how those rules are being used. So here's the rules glossary, and what I want to do here is, this is fairly long because a lot of this is just reprinting of what they already printed in the previous playtest. So we can see here a change log. This is really appreciated. So they tell us what things to look at because they have changed. Now some of this stuff is obvious, like the aid spell. Well, obviously if they put it here, it's changed. But we can also see things like long rest has changed. And we wouldn't necessarily know to look at long rest because it was in the previous playtest. So let's go over everything that has changed. First up, we have the aid spell. In the game right now, what you do is you cast it, use your action, range of 30 feet, you select 3 creatures, and their current hit point maximum and current hit points are increased by 5, and if you upcast it, then it's an additional 5 per spell level. And I think the intention of the spell is kind of as a buff, right? So basically you make everyone a little bit tougher. The issue with that is it didn't end up being used as a buff as often as I saw it used as an emergency heal. So your party member went down, you cast aid, their current hit points increases from 0 to 5, and they pop back up again. So the changes here fix that issue. So it's still second level, still in action, still 30 feet. Now we can select up to 6 creatures, so twice as many creatures, but each target gains 5 temporary hit points. So instead of getting increased to your hit point maximum, you're getting temporary hit points. Of course, if you have 0 hit points, you will remain unconscious, even if you're targeted with this spell. So it does kind of fix the issue. And temporary hit points, probably not as good as increasing your maximum hit points. But on the other hand, because we can select 6 creatures instead of 3, we are getting a significant amount more targeting. And then for upcasting, just like before, every time we upcast, it's an additional 5. But in this case, 5 temporary hit points instead of hit point maximum. So as far as the change goes, I think this is clear. It's more obvious how it's supposed to work. And because they have kind of combined a nerf with a buff, overall it still looks like a good spell. So I'm in for it. Now I notice on the change log, they say the attack action has been changed. It says equipping weapons section. So the equipping weapons section was supposedly changed, but I don't see the change. So I'm just going to go down to the attack action. And equipping weapons, here it is. It says, you can equip or unequip one weapon before or after each attack you make as part of this action, even if the attack is with an unarmed strike. Well, here is the expert classes playtest document. Let me just move it over. There we are. Equipping weapons. You can equip or unequip one weapon before or after any attack you make as part of this action, even if the attack is with an unarmed strike. I think that's word for word. So I'm not sure if they intended there to be a change and just, forgot about it, or there was some kind of file error or cut and paste error or something. But this is identical to what it was. So I'm not sure why it's listed on the changelog, but there's some kind of error there. All right, the Banishment spell. So I'm going to have to kind of scroll down here because it's on 2 pages. But basically, there's 2 changes to the spell. There's a minor change and a major change. The minor change is that the creature you target with the Banishment spell is banished to a demiplane regardless of its origin. So before, if you were to cast Banishment on a creature that was from the Abyss, then that's where you banish it, to the Abyss. Now, you are automatically sent to a demiplane regardless. But if you are an Aberration, Celestial, Elemental, Fey, or Fiend, then you don't return after a minute banished by this spell. Instead, you get sent off to your home plane. The big change is that if you banish something, it's going to continue to make saving throws at the end of each of its turns, and if it makes it, the spell ends early. So that's actually a fairly major nerf, though this is not the spell that got nerfed the most. Alright, the next thing is we have a new condition. It's called Dazed. It says, while dazed, you experience the following effect. Limited activity. You can move or take one action on your turn, but not both. You also can't take bonus actions or a reaction. So this is pretty darn close to what happens to you if you fail your save against Atasha's Mind Whip. So a similar kind of thing is going to occur more often within the rules, obviously, enough that it's worth actually having a whole condition devoted to it. And we do see one example in this playtest of the Dazed condition, and kind of surprisingly, and this is a bit of a preview of what we're yet to talk about, it's going to be under the Cleric's Turn Undead ability. And the Guidance spell. The Guidance spell was changed in the last playtest, and now they have changed it again. So here's the version from the previous playtest. It's a 0-level divination spell. It's a reaction you take in response to you or an ally within 30 feet of you failing an ability check, range of 30 feet. You channel magical insight into a creature who failed the ability check. That creature can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the check, potentially turning it into a success. And then it says, once a creature rolls the die for this spell, that creature can't benefit from the spell again until the creature finishes a long rest. Now, here is the revised version. Still a reaction, however, the distance has been changed to 10 feet of you when they fail an ability check, so they have to be significantly closer. It was 30 feet before. You can channel magical insight into the creature who failed the ability check. That creature can roll the d4 and add the number rolled to the check, potentially turning it into a success, period. So nothing about only being able to benefit from this once. You can benefit again and again, but it's going to take a reaction every time, and now the distance is reduced to 10 feet. All right, the next thing that got changed is the influence action. Here it is, influence action. This was introduced in the last playtest, and it is mostly the same. There's one change that is fairly significant. So I'm just going to scroll down till I get to it. Here we are. Okay, so we have an ability check associated with this action, and setting the DC, it says the minimum DC for the check is 15 or the creature's intelligence score, whichever is higher. Before, it had this chart. I can show you the chart quickly. So here's the old chart, not that old, a month old, I guess, that had a DC of 10 or a DC of 20. And so a 10 was a basic success, and then a 20 was a great success, I guess. And now that has been simplified, it's just 15 or the creature's intelligence score, whichever is higher. This is also probably a little bit more difficult because we're looking at a minimum of 15 DC instead of 10, which is probably a good thing. 10 was probably too low. Now, what this doesn't have is as much specificity as to what happens if you make the check. It was really quite detailed before. Now it's a little more open for interpretation. And this could be some A/B testing. Would you rather have it like this, or would you rather have it like you had it in the last playtest? Let them know in the survey. Speaking of A/B testing, and by the way, I reacted to a video yesterday, it's up on the channel, where Jeremy Crawford talks about how the surveys work, how they interpret them, and all the design goals of the game. It was really an incredible video, but one of the things he mentioned is they specifically will put one set of rules in one playtest and one in another, and then they compare the survey results, and that's called A/B testing, so they can see which one you prefer. Well, we 100% have that here with the invisible condition, because they've made a change. They've gone back again. In our last playtest, we discovered that the invisible condition still had that interaction where even if you were seen, it didn't turn off the rest of the condition. However, in this one, you can see if a creature can somehow see you, as with blindsight, you don't gain this benefit against that creature. So once again, let them know which version you prefer using the surveys. There is no question this is A/B testing. Here's the invisible condition with the interaction with being seen that we have in 5th edition. Here's the invisible condition where now if you're seen, you lose the advantage and disadvantage. Which do you prefer? They're asking you, let them know. All right, here's one of my favorites, the long rest rules. So there's some minor shuffling in how the long rest rules are worded, but for the most part, it's the same, except for this: interrupting the rest. A long rest is stopped by the following interruptions: combat, casting a spell other than a 0-level spell, or 1 hour of walking or other physical exertion. So this would mean rest casting is gone. So the idea of rest casting is that when you finish the rest, you gain the following benefits, and one of them is you get your spell slots back. So the idea would be, like a minute before your long rest is over, you cast all the spells you have left. So if you have any spells remaining or spell slots remaining, you cast spells with long durations, and then you get them all back a minute later, and then you can start your day with all these spells up and still have all your spell slots. And the wording in long rest I thought was never really clear enough to know whether this for sure worked or didn't work. However, that is clarified here. Now, casting a spell other than a 0-level spell interrupts the rest 100%. Will they keep this? I hope so. All right, another spell that got changed, and pretty significantly, is Prayer of Healing. Now this one got a big buff. All right, so Prayer of Healing in 5th edition is a terrible spell. I almost never talk about it because it's not good. This is a lot better. So it's 2nd level spell still has a 10-minute casting time. You utter an extended prayer of restoration, choose a number of willing creatures equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. Each of those creatures who remains within range for the spell's entire casting time gains the benefit of a short rest and also regains 2d8 hit points. And a creature can't be affected by the spell again until the creature finishes the long rest. So that's pretty big. So 10-minute casting time, 2nd level spell, benefits of a short rest, but only once per long rest. Plus you get the 2d8 healing. There's a spell in 5th edition that does something similar, and that's Catnap, but it is a 3rd level spell and still has a 10-minute casting time, and it doesn't give you the 2d8 healing. Furthermore, when you cast Catnap, everyone falls unconscious. So I would say Prayer of Healing is better even with the limitation of once per long rest, and it's only 2nd level. So yeah, nice changes for Prayer of Healing. Next spell that got a change is Resistance, and surprise, surprise, they have changed it to a reaction. So like with Guidance, Resistance is going to be a reaction, and I gotta tell you, that's exactly what this spell needed. Now, Guidance, before, people always took it, and it was one of the best Cleric cantrips, and Resistance was one of the worst Cleric cantrips, even though they did a very similar thing. But the reason is because you don't always know when you're going to need to make a saving throw, but you tend to know most of the time when you're going to make an ability check. So that made Guidance just a lot better. And Resistance, you just never knew when to cast it. But now, with it being a reaction, Resistance just got way better, because a D4 bonus to a saving throw using a reaction is great. So I would take resistance for sure now. And I should mention that I have been kind of working on a plan to do cleric spell rankings, and I've actually recorded my cantrip ratings already. And in that recording, I say resistance should be a reaction. So when you see that, I actually recorded that before reading this. All right, now here's a tough one. Spiritual Weapon. Here is the new version of the Spiritual Weapon spell. And I'll tell you, there's one change, and here it is. Concentration. Spiritual Weapon is basically the same, except now you have to concentrate on it. That is huge. Yeah, wow. Spiritual Weapon just got a massive nerf. And this makes me wonder how, damaging spells are going to be dealt with in general. Like, are we going to see damaging spells in general get nerfed? Not sure, but this one, adding concentration, is a big, big nerf here. Now, here's one that hasn't been changed, Truesight. But I just will say that this is the first time we've seen it in the Unearthed Arcana, and it is mechanically the same, but look how much more nicely this is laid out than the 5th edition rules. The 5th edition rules just give you a block of text. Now they've broken it down. This is what it does to darkness. This is what it does to invisibility. This is what it does for visual illusions, transformations, and the ethereal plane. I love this formatting. All right, that's the rules glossary. And like I said, big changes there, especially with long rests. That's in the optimization community, the debate about rest casting has been going on forever. If this makes it to the final version, then that debate is finally solved. All right, so we have a few new feats here. Ability score improvement is listed here, but it is the same. They've laid it out slightly different, but other than that, it's the same. But we have 3 new feats. They're all epic feats, and here they are. So first, Epic Boon of Fate. This is available to the Mage or Priest group. And now in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's the Boon of Fate, and that was once per short rest. Here, we can use this once after every short rest, long rest, or when we roll initiative. So it's usable a lot more often. And basically, if you can see a creature within 60 feet that makes a d20 test, you can roll a d10 and apply the number rolled as a bonus or a penalty to the d20 roll. So, pretty good feature, and usable reasonably often. This is actually one of the better epic boons I've seen so far in this playtest, at least in terms of power level, because I've kind of felt that the epic boons that we've seen so far don't feel epic enough. This one feels more epic. They could potentially even go further than this. But compared to what we've seen so far, this one's pretty good. Then we get the Epic Boon of Spell Recall. This one, unfortunately, got a big nerf. Okay, so it's Mage or Priest group, and the Dungeon Master's Guide version allows you to cast any spell you know without expending a spell slot once per long rest. Now you can cast any spell you have prepared without expending a spell slot, provided the spell is 5th level or lower. And again, once per long rest. So this is 1 additional spell slot of up to 5th level per long rest at 20th level. That is just not a capstone. That is not a capstone. That's awful. A 20th level character getting their epic boon should get a way more than a 5th level spell slot. If they had made this like usable proficiency bonus times per long rest or something, then maybe. But 1 5th level spell does not cut it. Then we have the Epic Boon of Truesight, prerequisite 20th level, Priest group. So you have to be the Priest group to get this, and you get Truesight, and this is identical to the existing Epic Boon. Truesight's good, so yeah, this is okay. And that's all the feats. So now let's go into the species. So they are tackling 3 species here. The Ardling, which we saw in the first playtest, well, they have redesigned it because the satisfaction rate for it wasn't very high. They have redone the Dragonborn because, again, the satisfaction rate wasn't very high. And they've done the Goliath, which is a bit of a surprise. They said there would be a surprise guest. I wasn't expecting the Goliath, so mission accomplished. I was definitely surprised. All right, so with the Ardling, what we were told was that basically they wanted to kind of lean into the beast side of the Ardling. So they were this celestial race, and their face could look like any kind of animal. So they want to lean into the animal side of this a little bit more, and the celestial side a little bit less. So let's just talk about what changed from the last version. The creature type, size, speed, lifespan, all the same. All right, so the Angelic Flight, which was the bonus action one-turn flight that they got, that's gone. It's been replaced by Animal Ancestry, so you can choose either Climber, Flyer, Racer, or Swimmer. So let's look at each of them. First, we have the Climber. This gives you a climb speed equal to your speed, and once per turn, when you deal damage with an unarmed strike, you can add your proficiency bonus to the damage. Gotta say, if I was a monk, I'd love that one. That's pretty good for monks. I'm not sure who else I'd bother with Climber for. Then we have Flyer, and it's not really Flyer because it's still not flight, folks. You get gliding, but it's not even really gliding because we've seen gliding recently with the Hadozi or previously with the Simic Hybrid. This isn't like that either. This one is, you basically get Featherfall. You use a reaction, you don't take falling damage. And you also get advantage on the jump action. But that's basically what it is. You glide downwards, but you can't move horizontally with it, so you're just falling and not taking damage. That's it. Then we have Racer. When you take the dash action, your speed increases by 10 times your proficiency bonus. And so that's 20 extra movement on a dash at first level. That's 60 extra movement on a dash at 20th level. So a fair boost to your dash. I don't know how much I would expect to be dashing necessarily, but if you were a rogue and you had cutting action and you were dashing with that, well, then I could see Racer being useful in that situation. And then we have Swimmer, and this one is probably the best, I think. So you can hold your breath for an hour, you get a swim speed equal to your speed, and we get a damage resistance. You get resistance to cold. The resistance to cold, frankly, is pretty much as good as anything else here, I think, except in specialized build situations, like I've mentioned already. We get 4 options now. They're all okay. And then we get Divine Magic. So it says you get the Thaumaturgy spell, but essentially you get any 0 level or cantrip level divine spell because you can switch it out after every long rest. So just pick the cantrip you want from the Divine Magic list and you have it. And you can choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma as your casting stat. And then you're going to get Keen Senses, you have proficiency in the Perception skill, and that's the Ardling. So you no longer get the limited flight, you no longer get the leveled spell casting, and you no longer get radiant resistance. And it feels to me like they took more away than they added. That's the way it looks to me. I would not be surprised if they still don't get a great satisfaction rating on this, and they may have to go back to the drawing board again, or just let the Ardling go. Then we have the Dragonborn. And if you watched my video yesterday on my reaction to the survey results, I suggested what I thought they should do to fix the Dragonborn, and I made a guess. He said there would be a special 5th level feature, and I made a guess what that was, and I batted 1,000. So everything I said they should do, or guessed that they would do, they did. So basically, really quick. All the creature type and all that is the same. You still pick your Draconic Ancestry. Then you get your Breath Weapon. The Breath Weapon now matches what you get in Fizbins. You make the attack action on your turn. You can replace one of your attacks with the magical energy. The damage is the same. The Breath Weapon is basically Fizbin's Breath Weapon. And then we have damage resistance to the damage type determined by your ancestry. You get Dark Vision. And you get Draconic Flight, which I guessed you would get. You learn how to channel the magical energy of your Draconic ancestry to give yourself temporary flight. As a bonus action, you sprout spectral wings on your back that last for 10 minutes or until you're incapacitated, or you attract the wings as a bonus action. During that time, you have a fly speed equal to your speed. Your wings appear to be made of the energy used by your breath weapon. Once you use this trait, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, so I didn't just have the wings nailed down, I also had the duration and how often it would be used. The one thing I didn't know is that it wouldn't be actual wings. I didn't know that it was going to end up being your, draconic energy wings. But mechanically, That's what I guessed would happen. That's what it is. And I'm thrilled. The whole reason that I made that guess and I made that suggestion as to how the breath weapon should be fixed is because that's what I thought they should do. And they did it. So terrific. All right, and let's get into our final species before we look at the Cleric. So this was really a surprise. Didn't expect the Goliath to be here. Let's take a quick look at the old Goliath because you know what? Not a lot of people play them. I mean, the Goliath isn't a terrible race, but I don't see many people play them. I think there just happen to be better options for similar thematics. But basically, yeah, the standard ability score increases. And let's just go down here. Proficiency in the athletic skill, you count as one size larger for carrying capacity and weight you can lift. You get resistance to cold damage. It says you also naturally acclimate to high altitudes. I've never seen that come up, but anyway. And Stone's Endurance. So when you take damage, you can use your reaction. You roll a d12, add your Constitution modifier, and you can reduce the damage by that total number of times equal to proficiency bonus per long rest. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the old version of the Goliath, other than it's not that interesting. Resistance to cold damage, and you can reduce some damage. I don't know. That doesn't grab me thematically all that much. So let's just look at the differences here. First thing I should mention is our speed is increased to 35 feet. I guess because you're like bigger, so you have bigger legs, right? And then we're going to get our Giant Ancestry. Now this is the one that's really different. So Giant Ancestry, we're going to pick the kind of giant that basically we're descended from. So instead of the Goliaths being like their own thing, I guess now they're like related to the other kinds of giants. So we have all the giant types here. We got Cloud, Fire, Frost, Hill, Stone, and Storm Giant. So we're going to select one of these, and no matter which one we pick, we're going to get the ability proficiency bonus times per long rest. And these all look pretty familiar. So the Cloud Giant gets the bonus action teleportation 30 feet to a place they can see. The Fire Giant, when you hit a target with an attack roll and deal damage to it, you can add 1d10 fire damage. When we have Frost Giant, when you hit a target with an attack roll and deal damage to that target, you can deal an additional d6 cold damage, so a little less damage, but you also reduce its speed by 10 feet. Then we got Hill Giant, and when you hit a large or smaller creature with an attack roll and deal damage to it, you can knock that target prone. And that looks pretty good to me. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to roll a d12, add your Constitution modifier to the number rolled, and reduce the damage by that total. So if we choose Stone Giant, we're getting the same feature that the old Goliath got. And then Storm's Thunder, when you take damage from a creature within 60 feet of you, you can use your reaction to deal a d8 thunder damage to that creature. That one seems pretty weak to me. So the Storm Giant one, to me, looks a little bit worse than the other options. But I think there's some good options here. I mean, the Stone's Endurance is just as good as what they had before, but we have some nice other options here. Bonus action teleports, a little bit of extra damage. I mean, this is all stuff that we've kind of seen in other formats, but it's nice to have that selection as part of your race. And then we get a unique feature for them, or at least unique for a racial feature. So that's Large Form. Starting at 5th level, you gain the ability to supernaturally grow. As a bonus action, you change your size to large, provided you're in a big enough space. This probably sounds a lot like Giant Smite, because it is a lot like Giant Smite from the Rune Knight. So in this case, though, the transformation lasts for 10 minutes, and Giant Smite only lasts a minute, or until you end it as a bonus action. During that duration, you have advantage on strength checks, and your speed increases by 10 feet. So instead of the extra damage from Giant Smite, here we're getting a speed boost. And remember, we're starting with a 35 movement speed, so this should get us up to 45, just from racial traits alone. And the other thing is, this is only usable once per long rest, which is pretty standard for the 5th level racial feature. So I kind of like this. Now, if we're already a Rune Knight, then maybe this is a little redundant. Then again, you run out of Rune Knight Giant Smite uses, because those ones only come back after every long rest. So this could boost that as well. And then we get our powerful build, which is the same. You have advantage on any saving throw you make to end the grapple condition on yourself. You also count as one size larger when determining your carrying capacity and the weight you can push, drag, or lift. So the large form essentially is replacing the cold resistance. Powerful build is the same, and then the choice of racial ancestry is going to replace the reducing damage. Or you take Stone's Endurance and you get the same thing. So overall, I like it. It's got way more options than it had before. It has more flavor than it had before. Is it better than it was before? Maybe. I mean, the Stone's Endurance isn't bad. And cold resistance, nothing wrong with that. Large form is potentially really good depending what you're playing. So potentially it's better than it was before, but I do think it is cooler than it was before. Time to look at the Cleric, and this is where we'll finish up this video. So we have the Cleric, and we have one subclass, the Life Cleric. I'll go over both of them. The description here is basically what we already know conceptually about clerics. One thing they do kind of specify here is that not all priests are clerics, and even a high priest might not be a cleric, and clerics marshal a power of harnessing divine power that few priests possess. The spell table looks the same to me, other than calling it prepared spells per spell level, and we saw in the last playtest kind of how that works. Also, and I predicted this when we saw the expert class packet, the subclass is gained at level 3, and the features are at level 3, 6, 10, and 14, so I would call that a total confirmation. All that is standardized for the rest of this playtest, and like I would expect on every single class for that to be exactly the same. Alright, so hit points, saving throw proficiency, skill proficiency, armor proficiency, which is now called armor training, it's all the same. You start with 110 gold pieces worth of equipment. That's pretty close to the middle of the road of what we've seen up to now. And if we look down here, the multi-classing requirements, they're all the same. Alright, big change to Channel Divinity. So first off, it's moved to level 1. And instead of gaining it as class features as we move up in levels, we just have proficiency bonus uses per long rest. So you're going to have 2 uses right at level 1, and then that's going to scale with your level, but you don't get them back on a short rest. And we have 2 options to use with Channel Divinity. The first one is Divine Spark. This is brand new. So this gives a proficiency bonus number of d8s for either healing or for damaging enemies. And if you choose to damage an enemy, they get a Constitution saving throw to take half damage. Damage is radiant, and the range is 30 feet on this feature. So if you use a Channel Divinity as a cleric, you can use it to damage enemies or heal allies, and you don't have to spend a spell. And Turn Undead is a little bit different as well. So as a magic action, you present your holy symbol and speak a prayer centering undead creatures. Each undead within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If a creature fails its saving throw, it gets the brand new Dazed condition for a minute, or until it takes any damage or you're incapacitated or die. While dazed in this way, the only action the creature can take is the dash action, and if it moves, it must end that move further from you than where it started. Alright, so spell casting, the system is the same as we saw in the last one. So you're preparing a number of spells for each spell level equal to the number of spell slots you have for that level. It all evens out. So that was introduced in the last playtest, and it is continued here. Now, one interesting thing is you can prepare any spell off the Divine Spell list. So the entire list is available to clerics now. That includes all the paladin spells that used to not be available to clerics. So if you want to cast Wrathful Smite or Find Steed, they're on that list. So it gives you some options you didn't have before. That brings us to second level, and you will choose your holy order. So you've dedicated yourself to one of the sacred roles, either on your own as part of a religious order, and you choose one of the following options, and the options are Protector, Scholar, and Thaumaturge. If you choose Protector, you are trained for battle, and you gain martial weapon proficiency and heavy armor training. The earliest a cleric can get heavy armor now is second level. That means if you dip cleric now, you don't get heavy armor regardless of any decisions you make, because that subclass has been moved to third, and the subclass isn't providing heavy armor anymore anyways. Now it comes through the Protector Holy Order. Second one is the Scholar, so you gain proficiency in 2 of the following skills of your choice: Arcana, History, Nature, Persuasion, and Religion. That on its own doesn't sound all that interesting. What is interesting is the next part. Whenever you make an ability check using either skill, you gain a bonus to the check equal to your wisdom modifier. So for years and years, we've had it where, the cleric figures they should take the religion proficiency, but religion checks are usually made from intelligence. So actually, the wizard is better at religion than the cleric. Well, with scholar, we can reverse that. So that's great. And then thaumaturge. Delving deeper into your divine magical abilities, you can prepare one extra 0-level spell from the divine spell list. I mean, not a big deal, but here's a big deal. In addition, you regain one expanded use of your channel divinity whenever you finish a short rest. So that was a change in this one, is that channel divinity is now proficiency bonus times per long rest. Before, we were able to recover it with a short rest, and not anymore. However, if you are thaumaturge, you can still get it back on a short rest, but only one of them. But there's no limit. You could take 3 short rests and recover 3 channel divinities. So you're going to pick Protector, Scholar, or Thaumaturge, and when we get to level 9, we'll be able to select a second option. So you're going to get 2 out of 3 of these eventually. Third level is when we get our subclass, and the subclass we're going to see in this document is the Life Cleric. Fourth level, we get a feat, of course. Fifth level, we get Smite Undead. So this is instead of, in the previous version, there was you could compare challenge ratings, and maybe those things were destroyed or not. Now we're just going to do damage to things that we turn. So you can cause your Turn Undead feature to smite the Undying. Whenever you use Turn Undead, you can roll a number of d8s equal to your proficiency bonus and add the rolls together. Each undead that fails its saving throw against that use of Turn Undead takes radiant damage equal to the roll's total. So basically, the weak undead will be destroyed, but the stronger undead will take a little bit of damage. Then subclass feature, level 6. Level 7, Blessed Strikes. We saw this as an optional class feature. It was really an optional subclass feature for clerics at level 8, but now it's just a cleric feature gained at level 7. So when you attack something with a 0-level spell or with a weapon, you can also deal an additional d8 radiant damage once per turn. 8th level, get a feat. Then 9th level, you get your second Holy Order pick. And then 10th level, we get a subclass feature. 11th level, we get Divine Intervention. So this is a level later. It used to be at 10th level. And it's almost the same. The only difference is it used to be that if your Divine Intervention actually happened, you had to wait 7 days for it to happen again. Now it's 2d6 days, which is going to average out to 7, but there's that random element in it. And this was kind of hinted like in the Old Player's Handbook, but it says the DM chooses the nature of the intervention. The effect of any divine spell is appropriate. So it's really pushing you towards, listen, use the divine spell list. And before it said anything from the cleric spell list was appropriate or something like that. So it's basically the same. Then 12th level, feat. 14th level, subclass feature. 16th level, feat. Then 18th level, we get our Greater Divine Intervention. This used to be the capstone. All the capstones are being moved to 18th level. And one difference here is that when we use our Divine Intervention, now it's only 2d4 days to get it back. Then 19th level feat and 20th level epic boon. And that is the Cleric. So let's look at our one subclass for Cleric, and then we're done. So we have the Life Domain. All right, so first off, the domain spells have changed. So let me just scroll up here. So obviously we don't have the spells gained at first level anymore since we're not selecting the subclass until level 3. But basically on each of these cleric levels, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th, one of these spells is the same as it was and another one is different. So at 3rd level, Lesser Restoration is the same, but we used to get Spiritual Weapon. Now we're getting Prayer of Healing. And speaking of which, maybe that's a good thing because Spiritual Weapon got that big nerf and Prayer of Healing got that nice buff. Then at 5th level, Revivify is the same, but Beacon of Hope is replaced by Mass Healing Word. At 7th level, Death Ward is still there, but the Guardian of Faith spell is replaced by Aura of Life. And at 9th level, Mass Cure Wounds is the same, but Raise Dead is replaced by Greater Restoration. At 3rd level, we get Disciple of Life, and check this out. When a spell you cast with a spell slot restores hit points to a creature, that creature regains additional hit points on the turn you cast a spell. So there it is, on the turn you cast a spell. What this means is if you cast Goodberry and you are a Life Cleric, it does nothing. It does nothing at all. And I just watched an interview with Jeremy Crawford where he's talking about this, and he's saying this is kind of how we intended it to work all along. Now, another thing I'll note is even spells like Aura Vitality. You would get the bonus, but you'd only get it on the turn you cast a spell, not on all the remaining turns. So all those little tricks we had to get the most out of this Disciple of Life, they're kind of all gone. And I am all for it, by the way. All right, let's move on to Preserve Life. So this used to be a second level feature, and it is the same. And I gotta say, I was really hoping that one thing would change. I wanted this sentence to be gone. So Preserve Life, if for those who don't know, I mean, it's been around forever, but you use your Channel Divinity to heal a group of the critically injured. As an action, you expend one of your Channel Divinity, you present your Holy Symbol, and you restore a number of hit points equal to 5 times your Cleric level. You choose any creatures within 30 feet of yourself, and you can divide those hit points up. That's where I wish it stopped, but instead they add this feature can bring a creature's hit points to no more than half its hit point maximum. Adds a bunch of extra math, makes this a lot less good. So yeah, I am disappointed to see that sentence still be there. At 10th level, we have Blessed Healer. This used to be a 6th level feature, and it's basically the same, but like with Disciple of Life, it's limited to the turn you cast a spell. But basically, this is the one where you cast a healing spell and you recover some hit points as well. And then 14th level, Supreme Healing, and this is exactly the same as the old 17th level feature. And basically it reads that when you roll dice to restore hit points with a healing spell, you automatically are treated as rolling the maximum. And so that's the life domain, and that is the entire document. So all the changes that are in this document that I could find, I have presented in this video. If you find any others, let me know in the comments down below. I've read this through a couple times now, but it's possible I missed something. So not unlike the last two documents, I find that overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I do think that we are moving in the right direction. I don't like everything here, but I think that if I compare it to what we have in 5th edition, well, it tells me how long rests actually work now, so that's great. It tells me how Disciple of Life actually works now. Well, that's great. We have a useful and interesting Dragonborn, a useful and interesting Goliath. That's great. Overall, I thought the Cleric worked reasonably well, and I liked the new features. I liked the new Channel Divinity. I thought it had a lot of flavor, and I liked the fact that we have multiple options with it. The little healing or blast option I thought was pretty cool. So most of the stuff in here, I'm pretty happy with. I think they still have some work to do with the Ardling, personally. If it's up to me, and it's partially up to me, we all get to participate in the survey, and I certainly will. I'll probably put under the Ardling that I'm not completely satisfied with this new version. But now that you know all the changes, you can make up your own mind as to what you think you like or don't like, and I encourage you, when they open up the survey, to let them know so that they can use that information. And we now know for a fact how they compile that information. We know there are multiple members of their staff that are dedicated to just reading the comments. That's such great news. So filling out the survey, we now have confirmation just how important it is. So if you want to make your voice known for the next version of D&D, make sure to fill that out. As for me, it's been a pretty busy week, so I need to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.